Los Angeles, 1983. A small apartment, 2 in the morning. An 18-year-old boy sits in the corner of his room, eyes wide open, hands trembling around a mug of cold coffee. He hasn't slept in 3 days. His mother stands in the doorway, exhausted, confused, begging him to rest. But he won't. He can't. Because every time he closes his eyes, it comes back. A shadow, a weight on his chest, fingers around his throat. He looks at his mother and says something she will never forget. "If I fall asleep tonight, I won't wake up." She thought he was having a breakdown. She thought it was trauma. The war, the camps, the escape from Southeast Asia, the long road to America. She told him he was safe now. He nodded. He looked tired. He looked like he finally believed her. And sometime before sunrise, he fell asleep. By morning, he was dead. No signs of struggle. No poison. No disease. A perfectly healthy young man. Dead in his sleep. And he wasn't the only one. Between 1981 and 1988, the Centers for Disease Control recorded something that had no medical explanation. Young Hmong men, refugees who had fled war-torn Laos and Vietnam, were dying in their sleep across the United States. Healthy, young, some barely out of their teens, no heart disease, no drugs, no trauma to the body. They simply stopped breathing in the night. Doctors called it sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, SUNDS. The numbers were staggering. Among Hmong refugees, the death rate from SUNDS was 25 times higher than any other ethnic group in America. The CDC was baffled. Cardiologists were baffled. Nobody could explain why these men, who had survived war, survived refugee camps, survived one of the most brutal migrations in modern history, were now dying peacefully in American beds. But the Hmong community had an explanation, and it had nothing to do with medicine. In Hmong culture, there is a creature called the Tsog. It visits you at night. While you sleep, it sits on your chest, presses down, steals your breath, and if you are not strong enough, spiritually, culturally connected to your ancestors, it takes your soul. The Hmong believed that when they left their homeland, they left behind the protective spirits that kept the Tsog away. In America, there were no shamans performing rituals, no ancestral altars, no spiritual armor. They were exposed, vulnerable. And one by one, the Tsog was collecting them. The fear became all-consuming. Men refused to sleep. They drank coffee through the night. They kept the lights on. They begged family members to watch over them. But exhaustion always wins. And when sleep finally came, for many, it never ended. Now here's where the story gets even more disturbing, because this wasn't just superstition. Something real was happening inside their bodies. For years, researchers investigated every possible angle. Nutritional deficiencies? No. Environmental toxins? No. Infectious disease? No. Then, in the 1990s, a breakthrough. Scientists identified a genetic heart condition called Brugada syndrome. Brugada syndrome is a rare inherited disorder that disrupts the electrical signals in the heart. Most people who carry the gene live their entire lives without knowing it, unless the right trigger comes along. And here is where science and culture collide in a way that is almost impossible to believe. Stress. Extreme, prolonged, unrelenting psychological stress can trigger fatal cardiac arrhythmia in people with Brugada syndrome, especially during sleep, when the nervous system shifts into a particular state. Now think about what these men were carrying. They had witnessed war, lost family members, spent years in refugee camps, and then, uprooted from every cultural and spiritual framework that gave their lives meaning, they were placed in a foreign country where nobody understood them. And then, on top of all of that, they believed something was hunting them at night. The fear was not irrational to them. It was absolute. It was real. It consumed their every waking hour. And that terror, that sustained, all-encompassing dread, was enough to push a genetically vulnerable heart past its breaking point. The Tsog didn't just exist in mythology. It existed in the feedback loop between a terrified mind and a fragile heart. The belief itself, the certainty of death, may have been the final trigger. Doctors have a name for this phenomenon: psychogenic death, or more colloquially, dying of fear. It sounds impossible, but the human body is not separate from the human mind. And when the mind is convinced that death is coming, sometimes the body simply agrees. The Hmong story forces us to ask an uncomfortable question: can a belief system kill you? The answer, according to decades of research, is yes, under very specific conditions. When a person has an underlying biological vulnerability, and they exist in a state of sustained existential terror, and they are completely cut off from the cultural tools that would normally help them process and manage that terror, the results can be fatal. This is not unique to the Hmong. Versions of the Tsog appear in nearly every culture on Earth. The old hag in Newfoundland, the Kanashibari in Japan, the Karabasan in Turkey, the succubus and incubus in medieval Europe. Every culture has a name for the thing that sits on your chest at night and steals your breath, and modern science has a name for it too. Sleep paralysis, a completely natural phenomenon where the brain wakes up before the body does, leaving you conscious but unable to move, sometimes accompanied by vivid hallucinations of a presence in the room. Harmless for most people, terrifying for everyone who experiences it. But for a man who already believes that a demon is hunting him, a man whose community members are dying one by one, sleep paralysis isn't just scary, it's confirmation. And confirmation of inevitable death repeated night after night may have been enough to make that death real. There is one final piece of this story that connects ancient nightmare mythology to modern pop culture. In 1984, director Wes Craven released A Nightmare on Elm Street. The film's central concept, a monster who kills you inside your dream, was not purely fictional. Craven has spoken publicly about reading a series of news articles in the LA Times about Southeast Asian refugees dying mysteriously in their sleep. He was struck by reports of young men who were terrified to sleep, who fought to stay awake, and who died anyway the moment exhaustion took over. That real-life horror became the foundation for Freddy Krueger. The Tsog, a cultural spirit born thousands of miles away and centuries before Hollywood existed, became one of the most iconic horror villains in cinema history. Real death, fictional monster, same fear. The story of SUNDS and the Tsog is not just a medical mystery. It is a window into something profound about what it means to be human. Our minds and bodies are not separate systems. Our beliefs are not just abstract thoughts floating in our heads. They are biological forces that can calm us, heal us, and under extreme circumstances, end us. The Hmong men who died in those apartments were not weak. They were not irrational. They were people who had lost everything: their homeland, their community, their spiritual protection, and then were told that the ancient force that had always threatened them was now coming for them on foreign soil. And somewhere in that perfect storm of genetics, grief, displacement, and terror, the nightmare became real. If this story made you think, and maybe made you a little afraid to sleep tonight, then Cognitive Glitch is doing exactly what it was built to do. Drop a comment, tell me what you think happened. Was it the demon? Was it the science? Or was it something in between that we still don't fully understand? I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.